Hi, I'm Jesse Gillis, the host of the program Now is the Time to Talk. Typically on this program, I have a guest with me who I interview and discuss U.S. foreign policy, war and peace, and such things. To a conflict of the schedule, I'm solo today, so I'm trying something a little different. I'm mostly going to be reading along statements I picked up, stats and whatnot, where you'll see infographics, but I'm giving you something to think about as we try to make sense of where we are today, U.S. foreign policy, politics, the costs of war. To begin, this is the war prayer. I'm going to read something I wrote, and then I'm going to take a passage from Mark Twain's short story. In light of Sextus Hexef's continual glorification of violence against his enemies, his gleeful recounting of issuing commands that kill men, women, and children, his crusader understanding of Christianity, using it to justify his holy war against Arabs and Muslims, his declaration to permit and carry out war crimes, I shall read the prayer in Mark Twain's short story, War Prayer. It's in the smallest of ways I share Twain's disgust of the blind loyalty that so many authoritarians demand, as I detest what I would consider small men, losers, who justify what they're doing. They hide behind, whether it's the flag or their religion, to do whatever barbaric things they're going to do. That is, I was, how old was I? I was in 8th grade when 9/11 happened, and I was in high school when we went to war in Iraq, and there was the atheist movement, the new atheist movement that had emerged because of religious fundamentalism and the conversation on the media about why we needed to go to war in the Middle East. So reading from Twain's prayer. O Lord, our Father, our young patriots, idol of our hearts, go forth to battle be, thou be near be them. With them in spirit, we also go forth from that sweet peace of our beloved firesides to smite the foe. O Lord, our God, help us to tear their soldiers to bloody shreds with our shells. Help us to cover their smiling fields with the pale forms of their patriot dead. Help us to drown the thunder of the guns with the shrieks of their wounded, writhing in pain. Help us to lay waste their humble homes with a hurricane of fire. Help us to wring the hearts of their unoffending widows with unavailing grief. Help us to turn them out roofless with their little children to wander unfriended the wastes of their desolated land, in rags and hunger and thirst. Sports of the sun flames of summer and the icy winds of winter, broken in spirit, worn with travail, imploring thee for the refuge of the grave, and denied it for our sake who adore thee, Lord. Blast their hopes, blight their lives, protract their bitter pilgrimage, make heavy their steps, water their way with their tears, stain the white snow with blood of their wounded feet. We ask it in the spirit of love, of him who is the source of love, and who is ever faithful refuge and friend of all that are sore, beset and seek his aid with humble and contrite hearts. Amen. And we think of the prayer, breakfast, and the Christian nationalism that is a spectacle in the White House and the administration and leaders and communities that support what the administration is doing in this war against Iran. How offensive it is to people of the faith that believe in a loving God, and for some reason the administration's using this. I mean, these are con men using this for their own objectives, whatever they are. But some of us wish to go back to something pre-Trump, something apolitical, where state officials and bureaucrats and military commanders, where there's a sense of like respectability politics, so the pre-Trump era. And in that light, I'm going to read a statement, a quote. This is 2013 Afghanistan. This is under the Obama administration. I'm going to read from a enlisted man in the military serving overseas. The first time that I witnessed a drone strike came within days of my arrival to Afghanistan. Early that morning, before dawn, a group of men had gathered together in the mountain ranges of Patika province around a campfire carrying weapons and brewing tea. That they carried weapons with them would not have been considered out of the ordinary in a place where I grew up, much less within a virtually lawless tribal territories outside the control of the Afghan authorities. Except that among them was a suspected member of the Taliban, given away by the targeted cell phone device in his pocket. As for the remaining individuals to be armed, of military age, and sitting in the presence of an alleged enemy combatant was enough evidence to place them under suspicion as well. Despite having peacefully assembled, posing no threat, and the fate of the now tea-drinking men had all been fulfilled. This is a statement by Daniel Hale, the whistleblower, on what he witnessed in Afghanistan, particularly for the U.S. drone operation. This is, you could say it's apolitical, it's what needs to be done. These are the enemies of the U.S. empire, you could say of America, and we're carrying it out in the most patriotic way by obliterating them from sight unseen in the sky. They never even see what's coming. He was released in prison because Obama had used the Espionage Act to go after him, and he was released in February 2024. He served 33 months for exposing this when he went public in 2014 to The Intercept for what he did. And what he shared, what he witnessed, and what we've been doing. And that goes for most things. I didn't say it on the Mark Twain poem, but he was speaking about the war with Spain, the Philippines, and how much he detested what the language was being used of our conquest of the Philippines, Cuba. And going back to Daniel Hale, we think of military-age males in the countries we wage war on. That's roughly any male over the age of 16, sometimes younger. Collateral damage combatants, anybody who might pose a threat, and that depends on what the administration deems a threat. And this is under Obama's drone program, which killed 3,793 people. And so when I compare SecDef and I compare the current administration with what was happening before, pre-Trump era, I quote Medea Benjamin of Code Pink: "What was once covert, controversial, and constrained is now overt, normalized, and defended." And we listen to the officials who represent the state, military, or the administration, or Congress. Could they be lying to us? Would they be lying to us now? Have they been lying to us? I think many people think they're lying to us, but what can we do about it? So I'm going to go back to Donald Rumsfeld for this. Secretary of Defense, George W. Bush, under war in Afghanistan and Iraq, elsewhere. And on September 25th, he gives a Defense Department briefing. September 25th, 2001, not so long after 9/11. A question from the reporter: "Will anyone in the DoD be permitted to lie to the media to help success by gaining military advantage against our enemies?" And he says, halfway through his statement, "Sometimes the truth is so precious it must be accompanied by a bodyguard of lies." And he's quoting something of what Churchill had said. "The answer to your question is no. I cannot imagine a situation. I don't recall that I ever lied to the press. I don't intend to, and it seems to me that there will be no reason for it. There are dozens of ways to avoid having to put yourself in a position where you're lying, and I don't do it. And Tory won't do it, and Admiral Quigley won't do it." And we think about the lives of where the WMDs are, where they're going to be found, the mobile weapons labs, that Saddam Hussein's working with Al-Qaeda, because we didn't invade Iraq until 2003. This is just after September 11th. But the consistent lying of why we went to war in Iraq and the progress we've been making up till 2021 in Afghanistan, the continual successes, we could see where they went, and the lives that were lost to pursue these things, to what end. And I bring him up because on the 28th of March, on Mark Levin's show, the fanatic conservative radio talk show host, He had a Mark Thyssen on, and Trump pointed it out on his Truth Social, where Mark Thyssen, and I'll quote him, "Al-Qaeda is no longer in Pakistan, no longer in Iraq. It's been destroyed. They are in Iran. Hamas is also Sunni. Iran works with the Sunni terrorists around the world, and if we don't get that enriched uranium, and they want to get back at us for what we've done, the easiest way would be to give it to Al-Qaeda and let them use it for dirty bombs. We are about halfway through this thing," Thiessen said. No. "And when it's all over, it's going to go down in history as possibly the greatest military campaign the U.S. has waged since the American Revolution." This is before the ceasefire on April 8th. This was about, a little over a week later. The ceasefire had happened when he said this, but there was talks about invading Karg Island, taking control of the island. Mark Thyssen, for people that don't know, and I didn't know up to this point, was the speechwriter for Donald Rumsfeld. So all the time that there's these officials, the neocons, early 2000s, lying to the public, no accountability, who cares? And this guy is still going out there saying things. He's got a whole, you look him up on Wikipedia, look at it for yourself. What do you think? What do you think's happening here when these people get the opportunity to speak on a platform and it's pointed to for what ends? What ends? What is this nonsense with Al-Qaeda coming up here? I'm not going to go through the whole thing. As I plug away, I'm reading things. Am I building a case for what? Ask yourself. For Afghanistan, John Sopko, he was the Special Inspector General of the Office of Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction. He testified many times in Congress over what was happening in Afghanistan. An Obama appointee in 2012, and he was there till actually when Trump dismissed him in 2025. In his report, I highly recommend watching the film Bodyguard of Lies. "Don't believe what you're told by the generals or the ambassadors saying we're never going to do this again. That's exactly what we said in Vietnam. We did Iraq and we did Afghanistan. We will do this again. There is no accountability. Nobody can keep eyes on all this. The money keeps moving. The amount of corruption that he uncovered in Afghanistan. I wonder in what aspect do we take it in as the American public that there should be accountability and oversight in these things, but there is no call. The document, the Afghanistan papers were released in, 2019? For all that was happening, it's still not major media coverage. I'll read a little bit about U.S. foreign policy. U.S. officials lectured about democracy while they and their covert operatives undercut free speech, bought foreign politicians, encouraged fixed elections, and plotted to assassinate foreign leaders. The United States pressed certain nations to honor human rights while turning away from human rights violations committed by allies and trading partners. American policymakers championed the principles of self-determination while they clung to decaying colonial regimes and snubbed the non-aligned movement. Washington lobbied for open trade abroad while practicing closed doors at home. The United States raced towards nuclear supremacy while it demanded nuclear non-proliferation for others. If the double standard did not undercut American assertions of moral superiority, other behaviors did. U.S. bombing campaigns and sabotage left millions jobless, homeless, and dead. The unsavory embrace and arming of dictator strongmen such as Cuba's Batista, the Shah of Iran, and the Philippines' Marcos facilitated their schemes to spy on, jail, and murder their domestic critics. The United States fueled civil wars, often through covert actions, disrupting societies and economics, keeping the poor poor, and spawning a plethora of anti-Americanisms. And you may think I'm being unpatriotic or that I don't support the United States, but there is a difference between what U.S. officials do and who the people are. Most of us are not responsible. The U.S. public is largely not responsible for what is happening, what these people do behind closed doors, where we can't see it, we can't gain accountability of it. And I can't think of a more patriotic thing still that to question what your government is doing, to hold them to a higher standard. I swore an oath to defend the Constitution. people in the military and officials sign an oath to defend the Constitution and listen to the orders of those appointed above them. So long as they're defending the Constitution, they're sticking to it. So when you're not following the Constitution, I ask, what are you following? Who do you follow? Going into the Iran war, so pivoting here, I have the printout from the front page of the annual threat assessment from the intelligence community. This is a collection of all the intelligence agencies and their assessments of threats to the U.S. This is 2026, particularly to Iran. I'll start with 2025 because we started a bombing 12-day war in 2025 in June in Iran, where this Tulsi Gabbard's in charge, the DNI, Director of National Intelligence. Regarding Iran's WMDs in 2025, this is public information. You can find this. We continue to assess Iran is not building a nuclear weapon and that Khamenei has not reauthorized the nuclear weapons program he suspended in 2003, though pressure has probably built on him to do so. That was in March of 2025. Okay, let's go to 2026. Again, these reports are long, and I'm just taking what is most relevant to what's currently going on today with Iran regarding nuclear weapons. 2026, the chapter, the outline, the structure of the report changes a little bit, but 2026 for Homeland Defense, halfway through a paragraph, prior to Operation Epic Fury. Again, this is 2026. This is March. This was released. Prior to Operation Epic Fury, Iran had developed space launch vehicles that it could use to develop a military viable ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile, by the date 2035, should Tehran to do so. So prior to Operation Epic Fury, they have the capacity to launch ICBMs spacebound to the U.S. by 2035. The conversations about imminence. What is imminent? We have to act now. We have to act preemptively to defend what? Again, officials get to lie to us because there is no accountability. They can testify before Congress, but who is holding these peoples accountable? So, for the costs of the Iran war. On March 12th, when asked whether there was any price point at which he would tell, this is Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent. On March 12th, when asked whether there was any price point at which he would tell President Donald Trump the war with Iran had become unaffordable, Secretary Scott Bessent said absolutely not. March 12th, the time of cost was $11 to $13 billion. On March 30th, speaking to ABC's Good Morning America about the war in Iran, Secretary of State Rubio stated, "Imagine if instead of billions on weapons, Iran spent that money on its people. They'd have a much different country." We're about $1 trillion today, not including the nuclear weapons program, and they're going to ask for $1.5 trillion for next year. How do you make sense of these statements? Trump, on April 2nd, 6 days before the ceasefire, he came out and publicly said something for discretionary spending, for the deficit. Really, nobody has said out loud in such a high office, we can't take care of daycare. We're a big country. We're fighting wars. It's impossible to take care of daycare, Medicaid, Medicare, and all these things. With those trade-offs, we asked, what are these trade-offs? What do you mean we can't take care of these things at home? I believe in 2016, his entire presidential campaign was about the corruption and how these people weren't looking out for you and for people that believed in him, that he was offering a way out because there was no alternative. There was no way forward after the failures of Bush and Obama. So I did the estimates last night, 22nd Wednesday, because today is the 23rd, Thursday. The war against Iran has cost $59.1 billion. What could that have, what could an alternative thing have been, where could this money have spent elsewhere? So we talk about opportunity costs, what are the alternatives? That money, almost $60 billion, what would that do? That would fund 796,000 public school teachers' salary for a year. there are at 75K per public school teacher, K through 12, 796,000. There are about 3.25 million public school teachers. Is that a six? Is that a sixth of the budget right there where we could afford to? What is that salary in some states? Is that better than most counties in New Hampshire? That's an insane amount of money that could be spent. Trade-offs. Again, Congress asks for these. It gets printed and gets sent to weapons manufacturers, defense contractors. The money is printed and it's given to contractors. Congress makes it into law. It gets printed. We can't do this. We can't fund public school teachers' salaries. 6.35 million annual health insurance premiums could be covered. That's an average of 9.3 thousand per year. 6.35 million covered. That's a hefty amount of money for a lot of people who make less than, say, $50,000 a year, who have to pay an enormous amount for their health insurance policies and get little in return for it. 4.6 million homeless people could be housed for the year at roughly a cost of $13,000. $13,000 per year per person. You could actually house 4.6 million homeless people. There's only about 770,000 homeless people. So many times over, could you actually house these people and have some? We talk about, well, that's giving away money. No, that's money for building shelters and medical staff and people to take care of these shelters. There's an economic incentive there. It's the same arguments they make for warfighting effort. The money gets printed to defense contractors or arms manufacturers that make those salaries. There's people that make those things. So it's an economic boon to some degree. You could have that for homeless people for a fraction of the cost. 4.5 million. No, I messed up on this. For daycare for 1 year at $13,000 a year, you could provide that for 4.5 million children. So 4.5 million parents could have their daycare coverage cost for 1 year. That's a lot of daycare offering to people that need it at $13,000 a year. That's pretty low, I think. And another one for, let's do school lunches. For all public school students, K through 12, school lunches could be paid for 3.63 years. That's school lunches. Not saying they're of great quality across the board, but you could provide school lunch to kids that can't otherwise afford it, families that can't otherwise afford it, but 3.63 years for all children across the United States. Those are the trade-offs we make when we go to war against Iran. Because money is good. There is good money to be made in war. If you look at the stock market for Lockheed and Boeing and RTX and Northrop Grumman. And we'll move on to defense contractors. Those companies combined for 2024 made $245 billion in federal contracts. You think of the Afghanistan between 2020 and 2024, Afghanistan, Ukraine, Russia, Taiwan, Israel, Palestine, Iran, the major ones, $771 billion they brought in. And the public statements, I made a list, they're delivering capabilities, they're supporting national security, they're enabling our warfighters and industrially mobilizing for supporting our allies. They're providing all these services, so they employ people. But how much of that goes to the CEOs, the boards, the executives? You'll see this. So the top 4 military contractors spent $89 billion on buybacks and dividends in the last 4 years, between 2021 and 2024. They spent $89 billion. So they get federal contracted money. They take that and they spend $89 billion. And it breaks down, you'll see, breaks down between each one. And $58 billion, roughly $58 billion of that was through us, through the taxpayers, through the federal contracts. Because most of these companies, like 60 to 80% of their revenue comes from the federal government. So Congress passes these laws to subsidize these programs that have contracts with these people, these corporations, and you can think, well, I'm helping out the stock dividend of Northrop Grumman. I'm helping that $7 billion of General Dynamics of the $11 billion that went to stock buybacks and dividends. What do you make of that? And not only this, but we're going to ask for another $200 billion for supplemental war package for Iran. That's over the course of the next several years. That's not an immediate upfront. And $54 billion for AI integration. So again, there are officials asking for more money for war effort, and Congress will pass this just like they're going to pass something like $1.5 billion. And you think you can't fund health insurance premiums or daycare or public school teachers, like none of those. We're just not going to do it. They can do it. They choose not to. It's a political thing. They just do not do it. Okay. Okay. So for U.S. foreign policy, because none of this is new, this has been going on and only been ramping up since 2001. You can scapegoat Trump and his administration. You can say he is ruining our nation. You can point and say how repulsive he is, for he is, but when 2028 comes and he's gone, and say a DNC candidate wins and the respectability returns, what will we have accomplished? Who will we next blame for our woes? We will certainly be in worse shape than we were today, just as we were in 2015, looking for something new, something to get out of this mess. And I point all this out and I focus on this because Trump is the current president. What were we doing before this? What were we doing in the last administration with, speaking of U.S. foreign policy, what were we doing with Ukraine? How many Ukrainians will we send to the front lines to die for what? How young will the conscription age go? How many will be wasted on this effort? And then for what? For us to abandon this? As crude and sociopathic as Lindsey Graham says, they will fight to the last Ukrainian. Do we accept that? Or how about the genocide in Gaza, or what's happening in the West Bank that was happening before the Trump administration already? Will we accept all of this? Because we will go back to that respectability before, which is what it was considered. A return to respectability after the first Trump administration. Recently, Ambassador Susan Rice and John Bolton had a debate by the Steamboat Institute. You can go on YouTube to find this. And I had a chance to listen to this because they were talking about the question. I'm going to read the little brief. I was going to plan on submitting it to the paper. I recently listened to a discussion with Ambassador Susan Rice and Ambassador John Bolton as they defended their position on the question, is the United States in the process of committing superpower suicide? You could find it on YouTube. You can find it on YouTube. In short, what I've heard in their agreement, Trump is ruining American credibility on the world stage and the ability of the U.S. to wage military and economic prowess across the globe. Both Rice and Bolton served as national security advisors and UN ambassadors. Susan Rice served under Obama, and Bolton served under George Bush Jr. and Trump administration first time. I anticipated both high-ranking officials to point the finger at Trump, decrying his policy decisions, not for its barbarity, again, killing people in another war, just the civilian casualties in this, what may be the fallout with the famines to come so long as the strait remains closed. But for not going all the way with Iran and Venezuela. Now that he's in it, they want him to finish it. He has to put an end to this. Just like many individuals that get media, whether in Congress or officials or ex-generals, he has to finish the job. They're calling for a finishing of the job, particularly John Bolton, because he's a little more raw in his language. Because right now it just looks bad because America looks weak. That is the concern. It is all about credibility with the empire, with our government on the world stage. And so you'd have these two people that think he is... Now, they differ on, is the U.S. committing superpower suicide, but as far as American credibility goes, for the same thing that Rumsfeld and I'm drawing blanks on the George Bush administration, but the same as you look at Rumsfeld's snowflake memos, the releases, you could find those. Those are publicly accessible now for the notes he was writing during the wars. They were always concerned with credibility. How do we look in handling Iraq and Afghanistan, amongst other places? So I ask you, what is the difference there? Sure, Susan Rice, there's more respectability as compared to the Warlocks, John Bolton. and she was part of the JCPOA, which is sanctions relief for the Iranian regime and an agreement about their nuclear enrichment program. But again, sanctions are economic warfare. The point is to crush the public. The Trump administration's made that quite explicit. When al-Jilani became president of Syria, Trump came out again and said, we're going to lift the sanctions because it's crushing the people. I'm paraphrasing him, but you can find it for yourself. Economic sanctions are meant to hurt the people, just like the blockade on Cuba right now. It's meant to hurt the people. It's meant to throw the state into disarray, into a failed state. Look at Libya. Look at Syria. Look at what we did with Iraq all the way up till 2003. How many children were dying, how many people could not get basic medical care, water, treated water, electricity. What were we doing? We were punishing the people. But it's an easy thing for officials to do that don't really care about the actual people. Again, it's always for the people. They may have dropped that now as a reason why we're at war with Iran. But at one point, we're doing this for the people. If you're not familiar with World Beyond War, it's a website, David Swanson and Company, leading experts on U.S. militarism abroad and what we do, just like Cost of War program at the Watson Institute at Brown University. I'm going to read from them in their conclusion on their latest report, Power Projection and Arrogance. This is talking about our bases worldwide. You would think of U.S. Western Command or Pacific Command, or, well, Western Command became Pacific Command, or Central Command, where they're located something to do with the region, the United States. But no, this is worldwide. Each one has their own scope across the world. Okay, so the world is ours. And I'm focusing on the conclusion from mapping out all the analysis of all the money and bases and infrastructure and the wars that have been happening over the last 25 years. Quote, structural military colonialism seeks to erode national sovereignty by requiring land, geographic space, and infrastructure without meaningful participation in nation decision-making. And I have one chart here. Again, go to World Beyond War, Power Projection and Arrogance report. I have the chart for the Pacific region, the 243 bases we have in the Pacific. 101 bases in Japan, 75 in South Korea. We think, how much can South Korea or Japan, let alone all the other nations we have bases at, distinguish themselves from the U.S. foreign policy? How much sovereignty do they actually have, self-determination do they actually have if we have this many bases, or we have bases in your countries? There are only a few places we don't have bases, and they are considered our adversaries across the globe. You think of the Middle East, all our bases. Well, okay, we have the concerns about the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation countries, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait. We have all these bases here. What is the purpose of these bases? Overall, the evidence shows that the global network of U.S. military bases functions as a system of control that secures strategic dominance, maintains access to resources, and embeds military presence as a permanent feature of international relations. Rather than stabilizing regions, this system contributes to the persistence of tension, the expansion of conflict zones, and the normalization of militarization on a global scale. These are launching pads. We can't wage a war against China over Taiwan without a launching pad. We couldn't do what we're doing with Iran unless we had all these bases set up. I had spent time in Al Dhafra in UAE and Ali Al Salem in Kuwait, and the concern there was Iran. The big concern, as I saw runways and military assets, with all this that we bring to bear, and the feeling, I'll take my personal opinion, the feeling that just itching for Iran to do something so we can get at them. Any excuse to do something. We couldn't do what we're doing against Iran without that. We have to move carrier fleets to the region to project military power. I don't know what the bases look like today. I've seen images. but I imagine what would it look like if we got into a war with China over Taiwan, which is where I think personally things are heading and have been heading for some time. And that's not just me saying it. I got to hear a briefing by four-star General Minahan in 2021-2022 while I was at Pease Air Force Base. That's the refueling wing there, where he got to talk about war with China by 2027. I'm not saying it's going to happen. It's just leading that way as they are considered a pacing enemy. This is the shift to Asia, to the Pacific under the Obama administration after we were starting to pull away from Iraq and wind down Afghanistan as they had to focus back on China as it was in the late 90s. So yes, we have all these bases. To do what with? All the bases in Africa and Europe and Eastern Europe and South America and the Caribbean. What do we do with these things? How could any of these countries possibly go about their own path and find economic opportunities outside the U.S. financial system, which has a grasp on most of the world? Again, the sanctions against Cuba or Iran or Syria before or Iraq or Russia do not work unless you have unless you are the dominant economic force and you have the institutions and other nations with you aiding in your financial control over supposed adversaries. And so I'm going to be wrapping up here a question. I'll blow up again thing. But how is the war economy working for you? How is all this supposed to be helping us? Again, this is supposed to be for us. These are people, we have a president who's supposed to preside over a government that's supposed to be representing us and helping us. We have Congress who's supposed to represent us. How does any of this war, just focusing on this war with Iran, how does any of this help us? Supposedly it's for us, but it feels like it's for large corporations and the donor class who give handsomely to the legislature and Congress to do their bidding, to help out their policies. What's the return on donating millions? Is it how many times over do you get in rewards? I say rewards, but it's open markets, or it's control of markets, or it's markets taking off the map. So I'll read a quote. "We should not be satisfied with choosing between empire with decorum and empire with the mask off." A lot of people like to say this is the empire with the mask off. Pete Hegseth can say, Secretary of Defense can say that no more woke, no more rules of engagement, they're woke. That's because before it was a pretend there were rules of engagement. There are rules of engagement, but there was a pretend that we weren't just killing civilians. We weren't just hiding it. It was the hypocrisy. Now he just does it because he always considered it to be civilians or enemies of his supposed faith or the U.S. to be less than value. They're not people. Or do we want to go back to empire with decorum, where we have drone strikes against people, and we say they're military combatants, and nobody changes that unless there's an investigation? And who can investigate in these rural places or where there is no internet service or it's an active war zone to do an actual research and find out who was it that was killed? So this last bit here, what must we do as the American public? The only thing we could do is organize. There is like the 80% of us that are not part of the machinery of the empire or the war machine that work for a living, that labor. We have medical bills. We have houses we typically have to pay for. We work for a living because if we don't, we lose our houses and our medical bills. Some of us have families or don't have families or want families, but the cost of living is too high because of reckless fiscal policies by the U.S. government. We want the basic things, to have a good life, a meaningful life, and that is taken from us because this out of control system is constantly helping their friends, interested parties, the donor class. And the only way to do this is for those of us who want these generally the same things, is us to come together, despite our political differences, what is shoved down our throat by the corporate media, and now more apparently the independent media, who is mostly an empty suit or a mouthpiece for some think tank or some faction that is tied to the elites. Come together with your friends, family, neighbors, town hall meetings, But there's no way out of this but the slow process of getting along with people who had the same circumstances as you, coming together despite your political disagreements, because you will not agree with everyone on everything, and you'll find that most of this is jammed down our throats to, you could say, divide and conquer, but to split people along these, you could say, culture war stuff. But there is no way out as you look forward to the 2028 or 2026 for that matter. What is on offer to stop any of this nightmare? There is concern by the elites that, oh my goodness, what a reckless job he's doing in Iran. He's so incompetent. They're asking for more competence to finish this, to get a better position, to establish our credibility. How do we establish? We remember the last election was, we will have the most lethal fighting force. We will hold up the military and dominate. There is no concern about you having a better way of life, for you or I or most people, anybody watching this. So I ask, you organize. You come together with people, you have difficult conversations with those you disagree with. And I'll leave you there. I thank you all for tuning in and listening to me rant about U.S. foreign policy and politics. Until next time, thank you.